Okay, and fucking A, it's time for Let's Argue, where I take on all your hot takes, unpopular opinions, and tough questions about anime. It's a ripoff of a show that Anthony Fantano does, but I'm an anime guy, so it's a little bit different. Now, the last 5 of these I recorded all at once, so now we're on all new material, and I gotta tell you guys, for the future, here's the type of thing that does not fit the show. Mick Bungie saying Hunter x Hunter 2011 is still the best shonen anime of all time. No one disagrees with that. That is not a hot take, or an unpopular opinion, or a tough question. Get out of here! Now this is more like it, from Vista. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is straight up overrated, and the quality of the story collapses once they reach the Arctic North thing. I don't know if I think the quality of the story collapses once they get there. I really kind of remember Fullmetal Alchemist being pretty consistent all the way through. I don't remember feeling like the story suddenly went downhill. There are a couple of moments where the characters just kind of like stand around and think about the plot until they figure out what they need to do to continue it, and it's a little convenient. I would say that's the worst thing that really happens in the story. Personally, I'm a big fan of the way that it all builds into this insanely long climax that resolves everything possible. I really enjoy the ending part of the series. I do think it's a little bit overrated, particularly for its artwork and animation, which I think is somewhat stiff, and as it goes along, you can, if you compared it to the original show, that one was more filmic in its approach. It wasn't quite so moving manga, as it were. But, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, I think it's completely reasonable for it to be as beloved as it is, especially in the West, because it basically does everything that the average anime fan wants. I wrote a post about this way the fuck back in, 2010. Go search My Sword is Unbelievably Dull, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Evo Morgado says, Konosuba's humor is extremely repetitive and predictable. I don't entirely disagree with you. I started to have a problem with Konosuba in Season 2, where I felt like it was kind of getting a little redundant. I mean, the show is at its best when it does have new ideas, and I don't think it ever stops having them entirely, but it's definitely at its worst when it's resting on its laurels and just kind of, using the same very basic jokes that sort of are the core of each character's personality. Waffle Got Toasted says, good writing won't fix a bad production, but a mind-blowing production can save bad writing. Ooh, I don't know if I agree. I feel like I've seen shows where the production is less than incredible. I mean, it really depends on what aspect of production you're talking about, because, let's say we talk about the original Trigun anime. The design sense is really strong. Even though there's not maybe the best animation or the art isn't always on model, the sort of, feel of the show is very well realized. So maybe you could still call it a good production? It's hard to say. I don't know if I've seen a show where no element of production was good, but it still had an amazing script, and that made me love it. I could think of a show like Planet With, where I would say that the production's not bad, it's just not really a strong suit in any particular way, but I do think that the story holds up. The dialogue and the characterization are what make the show worth watching, but definitely the reverse of what you said, I believe, is true, where if a show has really incredible visuals, really incredible production, you can sort of forgive the story maybe not being the best, but it would have to be absolutely delightful to watch. Starman TES says, Haibane Renmei is way better than Lane or anything else Abe has worked on, really. I don't know how unpopular of an opinion this is. I mean, way back at the end of 2009, all of the anime bloggers had made their, top 50 of the decade lists, and when this one site called Aqua Blue Sweater, I think, who is a statistician who made a bunch of charts out of other people's charts, and he had congregated all of the top 50 lists of the decade, and the number one across all the lists was Haibane Renmei. It was the most liked show of all anime bloggers of the entire of the 2000s. So yeah, I don't know if it's underrated. Icon says, there are less than 10 comedy anime that are actually funny. I bet I can name 10 off the top of my head that I at least find funny. Gintama, Haven't You Heard I'm Sakamoto, Uchu Senkan Tiramisu, Konosuba, Shirobako. I mean, it's not purely a comedy, but I think it's pretty fucking hilarious. Ichigo Marshmallow. K-On! Though again, the comedy is not necessarily the best aspect of the show, but it is a funny show. Cromartie High School. Full Metal Panic Fumofu. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember it being pretty fucking funny. Denki Guy? I liked Denki Guy. That's 10 off the top of my head, and I swear that the gaps between those jump cuts were not that long. Lol, this guy has an anime avatar, says there's not enough unique sports anime coming out, either in themes or subject matter. Most of them are stuck within the shonen genre and fail to innovate. I definitely think that there is a problem with sports anime being too focused on the high school style, the inter-high championship style of sports drama. I've made the distinction before between like career sports anime like Hajime no Ippo and Baby Steps, and then the high school ones like Kuroko's Basketball, Haikyuu. I think that maybe the success of those shows and other stuff from before like Prince of Tennis, which I actually don't know if it falls into this category because I haven't seen it, but you know, the popularity of the shonen sports ones has caused imitators to spring up in their wake. I definitely think we could use even more unique sports anime, but I don't know if I would say there's a shortage. We just had Megalobox last year, which doesn't really follow either of those types of story. It's completely unique. We've had stuff like Keijo, in the last couple years, which makes up its own sport and takes a different approach. There was that volleyball anime from last year as well, so the stuff's still coming out. I don't know how much of it is good, but, it exists. The Keynotion says, allowing a fan base to color your idea of a property is silly and shows a strong lack of character and respect for said property. Does anybody disagree with this? I mean, there's people all the time who will say, like, a fan base ruined this thing for me, and then, yet, anytime somebody expresses the sentiment of this tweet, everyone will spring to agree with it because it's kind of, like, obvious and just being a reasonable person. So, I don't know. I think we just like to be able to hate things. I think that a fan base is just a good excuse for you to be negative about something, and you want to be, especially because nobody has time to get into absolutely everything. So if you can see something that maybe you would get into, maybe you wouldn't, but the fan base is annoying, you can just write it off a lot more easily. CJ says Kemari Kusa is one of, if not the best anime of the winter 2019 season. I haven't finished it, but I greatly enjoyed the 3 episodes I think that I watched, maybe only 2. I think it's a really good show. Definitely underrated. If you were disappointed with Kemono Friends Season 2, go watch the thing that the guy who made the first season went on to make, because it was great. Tim Rum says this season is shit. I disagree. This season, I've only watched like 6 or 7 shows for sampling them, and I've already found at least 2 that I've really enjoyed. Carol and Tuesday and Sarazanmai. Both of which I was looking forward to, since Shinichiro Watanabe and Kunihiko Ikuhara are 2 of my favorite directors, and they very rarely make shows, so, getting a season with both of them, I can never consider that to be a negative, Icon says, anime that its main point is mecha are shit. I don't know if there's a lot of anime whose main point is mecha. I mean, mecha anime tend to be sort of amalgamation storylines. They sort of use the fact that the draw of the series is robots, for people who like that kind of show, to just tell whatever kind of story they want, and often to, not necessarily cling to any one genre. And as a result, I think that they can be some of the most interesting shows out there because they're not trying to hold themselves to just like one style. They're all over the place, which can be a clusterfuck or it can be great. The only anime I can think of where like the entire point is mecha might be like the Super Robot Wars OG anime or whatever, and like nobody's going around saying that those shows are amazing. Those exist just for like diehard mecha fans. Jeff says, any anime with the source material is either 1, an ad for the source material, or 2, fan service for fans of the source material. Therefore, anime-onlys aren't entitled to a higher quality product than the source material or a spoiler-free environment. Ooh, interesting. I mean, I don't think anybody's entitled to a spoiler-free environment. I think that people are pissy babies about spoilers. If you really care, you have every opportunity to not put yourself in the line of sight of spoilers. The only person who I can really respect in this regard is Matthew Matosis, who I think like 6 months prior to Persona 5 coming out, just left Twitter entirely. He said, I don't want to see any spoilers for Persona, and I know that you people will spoil me in some way, because everybody has a different line of what they consider to be spoilers. Some people think literally any information whatsoever is a spoiler, and he's that type of person, so he said, fuck it, I'm not going to be on the internet. You have the opportunity to do that. When you put yourself around other people, you put yourself in the line of fire of other people. So, yeah, I don't feel any sympathy for people getting spoiled, especially because I don't think spoilers fucking matter. I don't understand why people are so fucking hung up on it. Michael2123 says, manga and light novel readers have lower standards for good writing, so that's why they always say the original was better. That's really funny. I mean, light novels are generally pretty poorly written, so it's I don't want to completely take exception to this, but I think that more often it's that they value the details. They value the things that don't get translated to animation, and inevitably there's going to be a difference, because something like the voice of the narrator of the novel is not often going to be translated into the screen when they decide to just show you things. And you know, whereas sound and light can provide you with literally the, you know, visual and sonic elements of a story, something like smells are not easily conveyed through animation, and you don't often have characters like thinking about the way something smells in a way that maybe if a character walks into a room in a novel, they might describe the scent. And so, you know, that's something that you're missing when you transition to the other medium. So I think that there is definitely more of a fullness that tends to come from text-based media. You know, it can appeal to all the senses just by describing them to you in a way that would be clumsy to translate into animation. Some people have found unique ways to work elements of a story that you wouldn't think would work in animation into it, such as the Monogatari series very famously, even though some of it was just flashing text on screen from the light novel. But, you know, I think that there are good reasons to prefer the source material, but I do think that a lot of the time those people, you know, they're losing something they valued, but maybe not completely appreciating what they're gaining in response. Even for me, though, it's harder for me, especially with a light novel, if I've read the original, to appreciate the adaptation, because I will have had such a clear image of it in my brain that, you know, you're basically fighting to convince me that this other version of the story is as worthwhile as the one I already experienced. Here we go. McLovin says, why some dickheads Hunter x Hunter elitist fanboys like to pretend that it is a consensus that Hunter x Hunter is the best shonen ever. An absolute masterpiece that will never be surpassed. I mean, aren't One Piece, Full Metal Alchemist, Slam Dunk... Jesus Christ. Great Teacher Onizuka, Haikyuu, and Death Note all above Hunter x Hunter on Mal manga rank. I mean, let's face it, a lot of the popularity of Hunter x Hunter has to do with the 2011 anime adaptation because of the fact that it is a no filler, no frills, it's all encompassing. It tells a massive story that never gets boring, it's well produced, and Hunter x Hunter is one of the best shonen, but like if you're somebody who mostly appreciates anime, I easily see why you would think that Hunter x Hunter was like the undisputed champion, because as much as, say, the One Piece manga might be better and more fulfilling, the anime has a lot of issues. The production isn't always there, there's a lot of filler, the episodes are way too fucking long, by which I mean they stretch out the material too much. So you can really just kind of chalk this up to anime babies. Like me! Anime Card Fighter says, in harems, with the exception of Little Sisters, the girl who eventually wins is always the least interesting girl. This goes double if she's also childhood friend girl. Yeah, I think it's like a weird... I wrote about this in my Tsundere's video, that like, I think there's almost an element of conservatism to this, where the idea is that like the guy is trying to get away from who he's been up to this point, that like by growing up he's trying to define himself, and so there's all these other women who have more extreme personalities who maybe he could end up with this one or that one, but in the end it's about realizing that he is who he is and like not changing himself and like defaulting back to the person who it actually makes sense to be with because you grew up with them. You know, I think there's some reasonable thematic underpinnings to this idea, but yeah, I don't know. It always comes off as weird and boring that like, why would you go with the most obvious? But then at the same time, it's like, if you don't go with the most obvious, some viewers might feel betrayed because they wanted the story to go in the way that they would expect it to go. I don't know. It's a weird trend. I don't even know how true it is anymore, because I feel like these days there's a lot more of these shows that deliberately try to go with the choice you didn't expect, or the one that wasn't obvious from the beginning. So, you know, maybe times is a-changing. Aaron says, Mob Psycho is posed to become the next great classic anime and has already reached that status. I mean, I think that's fair to say. Actually, cut this out. This is not even good.